Hi, I'm Brett Johnson, former United States most wanted cyber criminal, now good guy. That's right, good guy. Believe it or not, he turned his life around. He's a good guy now. I'm also host of the Brett Johnson Show. Today's episode number 52, Silicon Valley and Fractional Reserves, DDSS, and Cybercrime State of the Union when we come back. All right, so we are back to the Brett Johnson Show. Today's episode number 52, Silicon Valley and Fractional Reserves, DDSS. That's right, we're back with more DDSS, don't do stupid shit, and Cybercrime State of the Union. Before we get started, hey, many people may not know yet, but I am back producing the show. Yes, I am absolutely back. We are on Spotify, we are on iTunes, and we're also on YouTube. Yes, we're absolutely on YouTube as well. Shows come out. Look, what I'm doing is I'm kind of doing a shadow drop on Tuesdays, putting the show out on Spotify and on iTunes, you know, the podcast formats like that. Then the next day it goes up on YouTube. And then the next day I come up and, announce it and do all the social media stuff and all that. I don't know why the hell I'm doing it like that, but that's what I'm doing. Probably because I'm somewhat lazy. But look, last episode number 51, at the start of the episode, I was talking about the concept of truth, and I really went into some of the things that have been going on in my life. And I just wanted, I got a significant amount of feedback on that. And I just wanted to take the time to read a couple of things that people had sent me and to talk about that for a second before we dive into some of the other stuff that's been going on. Because, man, there's a shitload of stuff to talk about today. Now, let's see here. Okay, so I'm not going to give last names. I don't know if you guys want me to tell your last names or not. And I pick up messages from LinkedIn, from YouTube, from Twitter, things like that. If you want me to mention your last name, go ahead and let me know. If not, I'm just going to use first names. So this is from Ryan, and he had just got through listening to episode number 51. And he says, Brett, keep your chin up. You're doing great things. You've been through some shit. There's no denying that. And you have every right to take the time to cope with your life experiences. I hope that you are not too hard on yourself for the choices that you made in the past. You produce quality content that the world needs to know about. Keep fighting the good fight. Ryan, thank you. Here's a big secret. I am not very good about taking compliments. I am the guy that will tell a joke about it or kind of laugh off compliments or anything, stuff like that. And so what I forgot who it was, but someone told me, it may have even been one of these counselors in prison, but they told me when I had received a compliment and I was laughing it off and joking about it, dismissing it. They said, hey, just say thank you. Because they knew I was having trouble. And so I will say, Ryan, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, man, I've been through some shit. I have, but it's of my own making. That's the thing I think that people need to understand is it's one's choices that often puts one in the shit. Now, when I was a child, I had absolutely no choice in that at all. I had a very toxic mother, and I had a father who was an enabler. But when I became an adult, it was certainly my choices that put me through that shit. That doesn't make it any less real, any less damaging or traumatic or anything else like that. But it was absolutely my choices that did that. So I want to say thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. I try, man. I try. I get people that, I was in the corporate world last year, and I worked for a couple of different companies, worked for AARP, worked for Arcos, a few other companies besides that. And one of the companies that I was working for, there were a couple of instances where the chief marketing officer and also the CEO, they came to me and they told me how they were having to defend working with me because I was this former felon. And, shit, I've been on the good guy's side pretty damn firmly since 2016, 2017, and extremely firmly since 2017. I just give myself that year buffer because when I first started this legal career of mine, I wasn't sure if it was going to work. I didn't break the law, but by God, I damn sure prepped to break the law in case everything fell. So, it took a year for me to come into the realization that I was going to be okay. And that's not to mean that there hasn't been temptation or worries or things like that. I had dinner with some law enforcement friends of mine a week ago, and actually a week ago today. And they asked me, do you feel temptation? I was like, yeah, every damn day. Doesn't mean I'm going to act on it, but every damn day. And it's I don't know if it's every day, but yeah, temptation is there. Temptation was the strongest during the pandemic. I was absolutely scared to death that I was going to go back and break the law because I didn't know how money was going to come in. And our credit scores went belly up, went pretty much broke, went through savings, everything else, savings, retirement fund, everything else. But by God, I didn't break the law, and we came out of it. And it's looking very promising now. So Ryan, I just wanted to say thank you for realizing that. We've spoken before, and I know you're going through some shit too. I know that, and I want you to know that I believe in you. You're already way ahead of me where I was at your point. It took me until I was in my late 40s, early 50s until I started to voice things, to tell people the things that I was worried about. I always kept that internalized, and that often resulted in a lot of cognitive dissonance and a lot of criminal activity. And I'm much better now about voicing concerns and things that are going on. And not great, mind you, but I'm much better. You're already way past me in that, and I want you to know I appreciate that, and I recognize that in you. And I think that you're going to be all right. Now that doesn't mean it's going to be an easy road. It ain't going to be no easy road. It ain't. But I'm a firm believer. This is what I believe. I believe there are so many people out there that really lament their lives and their position in life, and they refuse to accept responsibility for the choices that they've made that have helped put them in that position. They blame anything and everyone else, and they sit there and wallow in that self-pity. And I want to be honest, there's a lot of comfort that can be found in self-pity. Oh, poor me. Then you get your friends and family, oh, poor you, and nothing ever happens. You just continue to wallow in it. It becomes very comforting, and you don't have to worry about change, because if you make the decision to change, that's a very frightening decision. I'm very proud of you that you've made that decision, because that's one of the most difficult things in the world. One of the other most difficult things is accepting one's own responsibility. I was arrested when I was 35, and it took me until I was probably 38, 2.5 years behind bars, maybe 39, for me to accept responsibility, for me to understand that the reason that I was in prison, the reason that my life had crashed and went all to hell, was because of my choices. I was the one that was responsible for that. And I'm going to tell you, taking responsibility, I don't care who's listening out here, taking responsibility for your life is one of the strongest things that you can possibly do. It is empowering. It is just a very powerful thing, understanding that you are the master of your fate. So I just wanted to say that. And I'm going to move right along and read a couple other just real quick messages, and then we'll get started with the show. This is Spencer from Twitter. Spencer says, just started episode 51. Man, just sending good thoughts and positive energy. You all have been through a lot. Please, or be sure to take care of yourself along the way. Spencer, I really appreciate that. I do. I've got my dog barking in the back. I'm not sure if anyone can hear it. It's a small Chihuahua mix. 24 pounds. Thinks it's a damn 80-pound Rottweiler. But hey, it's going to bark sometimes. Spencer, I just wanted to say thank you. I really do. That means a lot to me. I'm not looking for pity. I'm not. But, to have somebody recognize that somebody else is going through some hardships, some stress, some strain, some anxiety, and that really, it validates me, and I really appreciate that. So thank you for doing that. Another one, John, a friend of mine, John, who served time with me, and John is an outstanding. I'm going to tell you, yeah, he didn't serve with me. I put him in jail. Yeah, I did that shit. Not proud of that, but I did that. Now, he will tell you, he's a good enough man now that he will tell you that he put himself in jail. But I ratted him out, and I was the guy that got him arrested. Again, not proud of that. He's an outstanding human being. I mean, he truly is an outstanding human being. And gentleman sent me a message today. He's like, you okay, man? Just watched the latest episode. Don't ever feel afraid to reach out if you need a similarly situated person to talk to. And I responded, much appreciated, John. I'm okay. Just going through this crap. I'll definitely reach out to you. And he says, just keep pushing along, keep doing what you're doing, and forget about all the naysayers and all the noise. Just keep pushing forward. To have a message like that from someone that I have screwed over, that really hits. That really hits. Just want to say thank you. So with that, we're going to move right along. When we come back, we're going to talk about Silicon Valley and the fractional reserve banking system. We're just going to break down what's happened with the Silicon Valley, and then we're going to move into the rest of the show. So when we come back on the Brett Johnson Show. All right, so we are back to the Brett Johnson Show, talking about Silicon Valley Bank and the fractional reserve banking system. So just in case no one has heard the news, the 16th largest bank in the United States, Silicon Valley Bank, it's no more. It's disappeared from the freaking planet. Okay, it didn't disappear, but over the course of about 48 hours, Silicon Valley Bank is no more. It lost, day one, it lost 68% of stock value. Day two, at the beginning of the day, it lost another 60%. And then the powers that be swooped in and said, nope, you're done. You're out of business. We're shutting you down. We're going to try to make sure that the depositors and investors are made as whole as possible. Of course, that becomes a problem because it turns out only 3 to 4% of the $161 billion that Silicon Valley Bank was holding, only about 3 to 4% max, was insured by the FDIC. See, the FDIC only insures accounts up to $250,000 per account. Anything over $250,000, not so much. They don't really insure that. Hey, we're going to cover you up for, $250,000. But, Silicon Valley Bank, we understand there's a lot of startups. We understand there's a lot of billionaires. We understand there are a lot of companies out there that bank with Silicon Valley Bank. How many? Well, get this. Over 65,000 startups rely on Silicon Valley Bank. Silicon Valley Bank is responsible for over 50% of the startups in the United States. There's a reason it's called Silicon Valley Bank. It is the bank that all these tech companies rely on. If you're looking to start a new company, more than likely, your Silicon Valley Bank was going to have their little fingers in it to make sure you had funding and everything was taken care of. Well, there are no more. That's a lot. That's huge. It's huge. Well, they're no longer in existence, and a lot of the investors that were there, they had a lot more than $250,000 in their accounts. So we don't know what's going to happen yet. Will they be covered? Probably, maybe, hopefully, we'll see. No one really knows for sure. We're going to find out some more on Monday. I'm recording this on Sunday because I'm traveling, but we're going to find out some more on Monday, and we'll take it from there. But hopefully, we have some good news tomorrow. I currently expect the Fed to have a meeting in the morning. There's current chatter that the Fed may cut interest rates by 100 basis points, so a whole percent. We'll see if that's actually going to take place or not, because the issue is that there might be a bank run, and that's exactly what happened at Silicon Valley Bank. And here's the thing. You're not at fault if you don't understand what the hell went on, because this shit's complicated. I made a post on LinkedIn that walked through what happened with Silicon Valley Bank. And I'm just going to read from that post because it's a nice short post and it won't have me meandering and droning on and getting off topic, because Lord knows I never get off topic at all. So let's go over here and read this post. So Silicon Valley Bank, currently tanking. A lot of posts and explanations on LinkedIn explaining in a very favorable light what happened. So let's break it down. 2021, Silicon Valley Bank deposits jumped from $76 billion to $189 billion by the close of the year 2021. So they had deposits, of $76 billion, and then there was so much new business coming in, so much new investors coming in, everything else, that it jumped from 76 to $189 billion, a whole shit ton of money. As those deposits grew, Silicon Valley Bank could not grow their loan book fast enough to generate the desired yield on that capital. So they had all this massive influx of money. The way banks make money is they invest, they loan it out, they do things like that. They do things with your money so that they can profit and make more money. What Silicon Valley, they had a big problem. They had so much money, they didn't know what to do with it. What are we going to do with all this cash? So they purchased over $80 billion in MBSs, mortgage-backed securities. Now, viewers and listeners out there may recognize that term, mortgage-backed securities. You may definitely recognize it if you've ever heard of a guy named Michael Burry or seen a movie called The Big Short. You know, that whole thing that caused the financial collapse back in 2008. So, Silicon Valley Bank, they purchased $80 billion of these mortgage-backed securities. And it was for their hold to maturity portfolio, HTM portfolio. It was meant to, hey, we're going to hold it until they mature and we're going to be all right. 97% of those MBSs that they purchased were of a 10-plus year duration with an average yield of 1.56%. That's how much interest it was going to pay, was 1.56%. Not bad. Not bad in 2021. All right. This is the problem. What happened? The Fed raised interest rates. Yeah, everybody knows that, right? Your mortgage used to be like 2 to 3%. Now it's like 7 or 8%, and the Fed is planning on making it more like 13%. Why? Well, because inflation is going through the friggin' roof, and the only real tool the Fed has to combat that is raising interest rates. The problem is that they keep raising interest rates and inflation keeps going through the friggin' roof. So they raised interest rates. The value of Silicon Valley Bank's mortgage-backed securities tanked. Why? Well, because investors can now purchase long-duration risk-free bonds from the Fed at a 2.5 times higher yield. Yesterday, this is not yesterday, this is Wednesday, Silicon Valley Bank announced the sale of $21 billion in AFS securities at a $1.8 billion loss. And they announced that they were also looking to raise another $2.25 billion through stock sales. Investors, well, let me tell you, investors, well, they heard that and they just shit right where they was geared. They didn't know what to think about it. They didn't know whether the shit would go blind. So they closed one eye and farted. And then they decided, hey, the best thing that we could do is we don't think that Silicon Valley's got enough liquidity. So guess what? We're going to try to withdraw all of our money. Then that's exactly what happened. A bank run started, to the tune that, hey, everyone was trying to get their friggin' money out of Silicon Valley Bank. Now, let's just let that sit right where it is and talk about why a bank run is a problem in today's world. And it's not just today's world, in a world of fractional reserve banking. And here's the thing, fractional reserve banking is not new. It is not new. It's been around. Fractional reserve systems have been around since at least the Middle Ages. And probably it goes back a whole hell of a lot farther than that. So fractional reserves are known. They're accepted. And it's really the only way that you can grow your economy. All right. So think of it like this. A bank. You go and you deposit, say, $2,000 into your bank, into your checking account or into your savings account. The bank, at that point, they may use part of your money. When you sign off all your banking papers and agree to become the bank's customer, you agree that the bank can use some of that money that you've deposited to make investments, to make loans, things like that. That's what you agree to. That's what's called fractional reserves. Now, what's called fractional reserves is the reserves at the bank. The cash on hand at the bank does not match the actual amount of money that depositors have put into the bank because the bank is making those loans. So the way you grow an economy is you have a set of people. The way a bank helps grow an economy is you have a set of people that make deposits into a bank. All right, so I'll go down to Wells Fargo. Yes, I bank with Wells Fargo because I believe one criminal deserves another. So I'll go down to Wells Fargo. I'll deposit $1,000. Well, 10 more people will go to Wells Fargo and they'll deposit $1,000 as well. So somebody decides they want to try to get a loan from Wells Fargo. So Wells Fargo, what they'll do is they'll take maybe $200 from me and $200 from 5 more people, their accounts as well. And they'll use that to give this outside individual who's wanting a $1,000 loan or $2,000 or whatever. They'll use that to fund that person's loan, and they'll charge that person a higher interest rate than what they're paying me to use my money. And that's the way that banks operate. That's this fractional reserve banking system. All right. So I'm going to read from, this is from Investopedia. I was looking for a very good breakdown of what fractional reserve banking is. And really, you can't get any better than this. So that's what we're reading from. All right. But I just wanted to break it down kind of in layman's terms before we get into all this crap. Fractional reserve banking is a system in which only a fraction of bank deposits are required to be available for withdrawal. Pay attention to that. All right. You may go and deposit $4 million into an account. When you deposit that in there, the bank is allowed to use some of that to make loans to other people. So your $4 million is not sitting in that bank where you had it deposited. It's out there earning and making money. It's doing things. All right. So banks only need to keep a specific amount of cash on hand and can create loans from the money you deposited. Fractional reserves work to expand the economy by freeing capital for lending. We already said that. Today, most economies' financial systems use fractional reserve banking, and fractional reserve banking has been around forever. Okay, forever. And there's a whole lot. I'll have the link in the show notes to this so you guys can go over and read it if you're interested. I'm giving you just the big breakdown of what all this bullshit means. Okay. Now, what's interesting is that reserve requirements for banks under the Federal Reserve Act were set at 13%, 10%, and 7% in 1917. So if you deposited X amount of dollars, depending on the size of the bank, how much money the bank was holding en masse, depending on the size of the bank, they only had to keep maybe 13% of however much money that you actually deposited on hand. The rest of it, that 87%, they could go out there and let their little fingers do the walking and talking and loan it to whoever they wanted to and hope that that person would pay you back, or they could buy mortgage-backed securities and go friggin' bankrupt. Now, in the 50s and 60s, the Fed had set the reserve ratio as high as 17.5% for certain banks. All right. So in the 50s and 60s, banks said, 13%, 10%, and 7%, that's too low. For some of these banks, we're going to require them to hold 17.5%. So that's what they did. And it remained between 8 to 10% throughout much of the 2010s and 1970s through the 2010s. Now, not horrible, not great, because there was this bank robber way back in the day, And the guy was asked, why do you rob banks? And his answer was, that's where the money is. Well, it turns out that is not where the money is. If you ask any criminal where the money is today, a criminal is going to tell you, well, the government's got all the money. Why the hell you think we are doing pandemic fraud and unemployment fraud and food stamp fraud and fraud and tax fraud and anything we can? The government's got all the money. They ain't got no security. We eat them alive. Ching, 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 bank, 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 retire, retire, retire. It's Lambo time. Yeah, banks don't really have all the money anymore. And it gets worse. It gets worse. So as of, I want to get the date right. I'm pretty sure I know the date, but I want to get the date right. I did have the date right. On March 26th, 2020, the 10 and 3% requirement, it went down to that amount, the 10 and 3% requirement. So if you deposited $1,000, some banks had to hold just 3% of that $1,000 as a reserve. Other banks had to hold 10% of that $1,000, $100 as a reserve. As of March 26, 2020, those were reduced. The limits, excuse me, my little chihuahua is barking again. I love the little guy, a little girl, but she's got a mouth on her. Yep, yeah, she's got a mouth on her. So, hey, Daisy, come here. You can do the show with me for a second. So, as of March 26, 2020, what happens? Well, what happens is those limits go down to zero. Now, there is no bank that has to hold any reserves whatsoever. That's right. No reserves whatsoever. Now, there we go, explaining fractional reserve banking. Just wanted to, that was Daisy. She's the producer, director, muse, and overall driving force of the Brett Johnson Show. So that's fractional reserve banking. It got to the point that banks now don't have to have any reserves at all in the bank. They can loan out. If you go in and deposit $1,000, they can loan it all out. If you deposit $1 million, they can loan it out all out. They don't have to have anything in reserve. So that is fractional reserve banking. Back to Silicon Valley Bank. $189 billion worth of deposits. They had so much money, they didn't know what the hell to do with it. So what do? They start buying MBSs. Not the brightest move on the planet. And I want to be honest. What they're going to say, a lot of the feedback that you heard right now is, well, you don't know how would you know? Because, it would make money. It was going to pay. Well, here's the deal. That was the CEO of Silicon Valley Bank made that decision in 2021. Now, we were coming out of that damn pandemic, and it didn't take a genius. It did not take a genius to realize that the economy was going to go to shit, that we were going to hit a recession. People were already talking when Dippity-Doo bought the MBSs. People were already talking that, hey, inflation is going to go through the roof. Now, he's the CEO of the bank. A banker should know, hey, how do you take care of inflation? Well, you raise the hell out of interest rates. Well, if you're raising those interest rates, that 1.56% yield that you've got on your long-term MBS, it ain't going to be worth shit all of a sudden. He should have known that. I personally think that the problem is that, hey, it wasn't his money. And I'm just saying that. I'm not just saying, I mean that. All right, but that's what happened. So the question now is, what the hell happens? Well, Janet Yellen, today is Sunday. Janet Yellen this morning came out and said, we are not bailing this bank out. Matter of fact, Silicon Valley, they were looking for a buyer. They can't find a buyer. Now, is it going to be difficult to find a buyer? Yeah, it's going to be difficult to find a buyer because, hey, those MBSs right now are not really desirable because you can make a hell of a lot more money on other things shorter term than those long-term bonds, those MBSs that you've bought. So that's the issue, is there's a lot of trouble. And as I mentioned before, there are over 65,000 startups which rely on Silicon Valley Bank. Now, Silicon Valley Bank is shuttered. It's done. They closed it down Friday morning. Those startups, guess where their payroll money comes out of? Silicon Valley Bank. So you've got tens of thousands of employees that, hey, their payday is in 4 days. In 4 days. And then they've got another payday at the end of the month, too. Yeah, the 15th and the 30th, that's their paydays. How are they going to get paid? We don't know. Silicon Valley, because of what's happened, it's brought the entire banking industry down. They've lost, in stateside, they've lost over $100 billion in value. It's affecting the UK. There's some question as to whether the UK's tech environment will even survive what has happened. So that's what's going on with Silicon Valley Bank. That's an explanation of fractional reserves. Now, the reason I'm talking about that is it absolutely leads into the last part of our show today, the Cybercrime State of the Union, and how things are happening, what's going on, and the success of cybercrime these days. And we're going to get to that in just a few minutes, but I just wanted to share what's going on with Silicon Valley. We may get some good news tomorrow. All right. Now, I'm with Janet Yellen. I don't support a bailout. I don't know why we're bailing out these banks that make poor choices when Main Street is getting shafted constantly. And that's exactly what happens. But I need people to understand that this is not just billionaires that are losing money. This is people who are workers. This is people who are trying to feed their families, put food on the table. They don't know where their next paycheck is coming from right now. So something has to be done. Just understand that this is not a happy time for anyone. I've seen some people on LinkedIn and Twitter gloating about Silicon Valley going belly up. That, they deserve it as some billionaires. Oh, yeah, screw them. No, don't screw them, because this is going to affect you at the end of the day. It's going to affect us all, and it's going to affect us all negatively, and there's going to be a lot of pain that comes from this. It may not be just Silicon Valley. We're looking at, there was a bank run, people lined up Saturday, at First Republic Bank. First Republic has lost a shit ton of value because of what's happened. So at the same time of that, there may be a bank run on First Republic. Bill Ackman has made the statement that if the government doesn't come in and do a bailout, that there may be a nationwide bank run tomorrow morning on Monday. We don't know yet. So we've got to see exactly what's going on. Everyone will know by the time this show airs, so we'll see how it actually pans out. I may release this show a little bit early, just in anticipation of everything. We'll see. Now, moving right along, talking about, Silicon Valley. I lost my train of thought, so please forgive me on that. But there's a lot of pain points here. I'm not sure where this all ends. All right, so I'm going to say I was mumbling and meandering and kind of just talking a little bit, hoping that I would remember the point that I was going to make, but I don't. So when we come back, it's time. It's time for a little DDSS. Don't do stupid shit. When we return to the Brett Johnson Show. All right, wait. It figures that just as I was going on to the next segment, DDSS, that I remembered that my train of thought came back, and I had a brain fart. I lost it, then it came back right as I was just moving right along. What I was going to talk about. Hey, you got to sit down for a second. Well, shit. Yeah, I know, right? Anyway, so what I was going to talk about is fractional reserve banking. What the fear, human emotion is what damages or makes fractional reserve systems not work. All right. So as long as everyone is on the same page, as long as there's no worries going on whatsoever, fractional reserve systems are outstanding. It's when people start to worry. It's when people become afraid that things turn bad really quickly, and you get these things called bank runs. And if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. Game theory, for example, game theory dictates that every single person acts in their own best interest, okay? Now, if I've got money in a bank and I'm scared that somebody is going to go withdraw money from that bank and it may affect my money and I may not be able to get my money out, then it's in my best interest to get my ass down to the bank and withdraw money too. It becomes in everyone's best interest to do that. So fear is the killer in fractional reserve systems. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. Silicon Valley would have been all right. It's not like they had went completely bankrupt and they had absolutely zero value at all. They didn't. They were down $1.8 billion, maybe a couple more billion, but hey, they would have been okay. It was the perception. Remember, the perception of truth is more important than the truth itself. Facts don't matter. What matters is what someone is convinced of and what they act on. And that's exactly what happened, a bank run. And that's exactly what's going on with First Republic, some of these other banks as well. People are scared right now, and fear is exactly the killer of fractional reserve systems. Now, with that being said, when we come back, we're going to do a little DDSS on the Brett Johnson Show. All right, so we are back to the Brett Johnson Show. Today's segment is DDSS time. That's right. Don't do stupid shit. Now, look, this guy right here, he is going to be taking over this segment. That's right. He's going to be taking it over, aren't you? Yeah, I'm going to take it over. But here's the thing. Right now, I suck controlling a puppet. I do. I absolutely suck with it. I can't do it really well right now or anything else like that. And if I try to do it, it's going to come off looking like shit. So I'm working on it. At some point in the future, this guy will be taking over this segment because this guy is able to say the shit that sometimes I can't say. And if anybody's got to complain about it, guess what? You can email him directly and he will promptly ignore any of those complaints. He'll tell you he reads them, but he probably won't. But you guys will be welcome to email him. So he will be making an appearance in the near future. Is that okay with you? All right, so I'm going to set him to the side, and we're going to start with our DDSS segment today. Today, we're talking about two different things. The first thing right out of the gate, I get a lot of inspiration. You know, when I do DDSS, this news segment that we're talking about, don't do stupid shit. You know, I'm reading Flipboard, all the news articles, LinkedIn, Twitter, all this other stuff, and there's a lot of stupid shit one could talk about. What I want to talk about first out of the gate, password journals. Oh, Brett, passwords? You mean somebody writing the names down, their passwords and logins in a physical book, a journal? That sounds pretty damn stupid. Hold your horses. That's not what I'm talking about. I am talking about writing your name down, your passwords and logins down in a physical book. The thing is I don't think, depending on who's using it, I don't necessarily think that's stupid shit. You see, there was a post, someone was on LinkedIn the other day, and they were making fun of those people who use password journals. And they were saying, you should never use a password journal. Get all your passwords in one place. That's the stupidest thing I ever heard of. You should use a password manager like LastPass. And they said LastPass. This is a week after LastPass came out and said, you know, them breaches we was talking about, they is far worse than anything we even hinted at before. They're all hands on fire. It's Armageddon. Look, here's the thing. There is not a one-stop shop security solution for everyone. Everyone needs to design a security solution that is best suited for them. And I'm going to tell you, sometimes those password journals, sometimes that is not a bad security solution at all. I don't use a password journal. I don't. I use a password manager in conjunction with an authenticator. That works fine for me. It may not work well for you. If you take a senior citizen, you take my dad, for example, he is not dying yet, but once he gets knocking on death's door, I'm going to need, if he passes away, if he kicks the bucket, I'm going to need access to his accounts. I'm going to need those passwords. If he has been using a password manager and I don't have access to the private key or anything, or the passwords that are in that manager, I'm screwed. And I'm going to be the administrator of his estate, what small of an estate it is, but I'm going to need those passwords. I'm going to need access to those accounts. So, and as you get older, sometimes, you know, it becomes problematic. Tech is not the easiest thing for some senior citizens. So as such, if you are in a house and you write your passwords down in a physical book and you have that book stowed away in a secured place, a secured location, I want to tell you, I'm okay with that. That's not a bad security solution at all. That's a very effective security solution, because I'm going to tell you what, how many stories, how many news accounts have you read of a home invasion taking place so they can get your password journal and then access your accounts after that? Yeah, you don't hear a bunch of bullshit like that. Now, how many stories have you read about a password manager having an exploit or being compromised? Yeah, LastPass. Yeah, Dashlane. Yeah, this past week we had some Bitwarden problems. Yeah, that doesn't mean they're not worthy of using, except maybe LastPass. Password managers have their place. They can be a very secure thing. Authenticators have their place. Passkeys have their place. They have their place, but figure out the best security solution for you, and it's not always going to be the best security solution for everyone else. All right? The don't do stupid shit thing is the aspect of, hey, understanding there's not a one-stop shop solution for everyone across the board. Okay? So don't do stupid shit. Now, moving right along, what I was also going to talk about is kind of a human thing today with don't do stupid shit. And what I mean on this part is understand what you can control and what you can't. You know, we cannot control, you can't control someone else. You can't fix someone else. You can't make someone else behave like you would want them to behave. All right. You have to accept people as they are, or you don't accept them. Understand what you can control, what you can't. The things that you cannot control, do not let those things control you. Now, what I mentioned that about is I'm very good. Sometimes I'll take a snapshot off of Telegram or one of these darknet marketplaces, and I'll post it on LinkedIn and Twitter, and I'll explain what's going on, and I'll give kind of a lesson of the day as kind of an insight into cybercrime. I don't like taking snapshots unless I'm able to do that. I don't want to just, post something from Telegram in the hopes of getting a lot of clicks, like clickbait. I don't want to do that. I want it to be something that really resonates and really shows something and explains something. So that's what I do. There are a lot of people on LinkedIn who don't do that. There are a lot of people that will post snapshots from the dark web or from Telegram, and they'll just say, hey, look at all the crime that's happening here. And they don't say anything else other than that. The reason why is because they don't really understand what the hell they're looking at. So they just post it there and get a lot of likes, get a lot of stuff like that. All right. So the other day I posted something from Telegram, and I gave my lesson of the day. And I had a gentleman, he responded, and I had a lot of responses to that. But he asked me, he was like, hey, back when you were doing the online fraudcast, your co-host turned me on to Telegram. Are there any other platforms or channels that you would recommend or could send me to? And here's the thing. There are all kinds of criminal channels, platforms, communication hubs, everything else. I mean, you can find stuff on YouTube, you can find stuff on Facebook, on Telegram, on Dread, on the dark web, on independent forums, things like that. There's all kinds of different avenues. There's stuff on Instagram. There's stuff on Twitter. There's stuff all over the place. So I did not recommend him any specific instances or places to go. What I said was it's much more important to pay attention to who's recommending something and that they know what the hell they're talking about. That's the only thing I said. So, and it got good response. And I think the gentleman took it in the vein that I meant it in. And here's the vein that I meant that in. I was not pointing anyone out specifically. I was not doing that. I was kind of hyping myself up a little bit because I know what the hell I'm talking about. You bet your bottom dollar I know what the hell I'm talking about. I was on the ground floor of developing this stuff. I built the friggin' trust mechanism that's still in use today in cybercrime environments. Yeah, I know my shit. Now, I am not the only one that knows my shit. I'm not, or knows their shit. All right? I'm not. You take any of those higher ups that were back in the counterfeit library, Shadow Crew, Carter Planet days, that whole era of the building the foundations of modern day financial cybercrime. You take any of the higher ups back then, they know their shit. Now, there's a lot of them are still locked up, but they know their shit. There are some that are free these days. A buddy of mine, John, he knows exactly what the hell is going on. He's able to predict trends. He knows where it's going. He knows what's important, what's not important, everything. He's outstanding. Albert Gonzalez, largest credit card thief in history. He's about to become a free man. I promise you that he has an insight and an understanding of cybercrime that no one else really has except people that were doing the shit back then too. John, me, Albert, people like that, we know our stuff. I promise you that we know our stuff. And if you sit down and you talk to us, man, we can absolutely fry your head on some next level shit. And I do it all the time with law enforcement. I do it in presentations. I do it all over everywhere to anybody that will listen. All right. But I'm not the only person that can do that. So what I was telling this guy is, hey, it's much more important that you tune in to somebody that knows what the hell they're talking about. That was all I said. Kind of hyping myself up. I got a response from my co-host, my former co-host at Online Fraudcast. And she came in and she said, wow, I'm going to try not to be offended by that. And she then says, you don't know. I've not talked fraud with you in over 2 years. You don't know what I don't know. And I was like, shit, I wasn't even thinking about you. So I sent her, within 1 minute of that post going up, I responded. And my response was, whoa, not directed toward you at all. Kind of surprised you would think such. And to be very clear, I am nothing but complimentary about you, both in public and private. So I sent that there. No response. I also texted, I sent an SMS to her phone saying the exact same thing. All right. And I let it go. The actual text message, I've got it right here. I was like, honestly surprised you thought I was referring to you. Posted the below as a response to your comment. And the below was what I just said. And I said, have a good evening. That was sent within 1 minute of the post appearing on LinkedIn. And then the next morning, because I slept on it, it was bugging me. The next morning, I was like, hey, I read over your post, which garnered your response. The gentleman said you turned him on to Telegram, and he asked about other platforms. I responded to his comment about which platforms, and I warned him the main issue was knowing who to listen to. If you don't think that's an issue, that's on you. My response had zero to do with you. You had turned him on to Telegram. My initial thread was referring to a Telegram post. I was shocked to read your remark, truly, and I responded within 1 minute of you posting that remark. Guess that's all I've got to say. Seems clear you have some sort of issue with me, and I've had one for a bit. Several months ago, I apologized. I didn't know what I had done to cause a problem, but I apologized and I meant the apology. My hope was doing so might help make amends. That looks not to have been successful. I wish you well on your endeavors truly. I will continue to speak highly of you as I have been doing. Take care, Brett. Now, here's the thing. Last week, I did a show on truth. And I talked about, hey, it's important to tell the truth. Don't worry about who you might upset by speaking the truth. Worry about who might be deceived, misled, or hurt when you don't tell the truth. So by God, I don't give a shit. I'm going to say it. All right. That's the thing. I'm going to get it out. Let the chips fall where they may. The thing is that I don't know what has caused the rift. And the reason I'm bringing this up is over the past several months, I've been to some conferences. Last year, I was at 3 or 4 different conferences, and people ask me, hey, have you spoken? What's going on between you guys? It looks like you guys ain't friends no more. And I didn't know. I'd certainly, over the past couple of years, I have made attempts, sent text messages, things like that, and I've never received a response. Never at all. What happens is I even saw my co-host at a conference, and at that point, I had sent a text message, had suggested we meet, things like that. Nothing. Okay. And I had no idea what was going on. Not a clue what was going on. I had no idea what had caused the rift. Ridley Scott's production company reached out to me to work on a documentary about my story. We were going to go with that route. We're now going full-fledged with a book. But they were working on a documentary, and I started reaching out to people to see if they would want to be interviewed in that documentary. And I reached out to my former co-host, and she responded. And during the email exchange, I said, hey, I don't know what has happened, but whatever I might have done, I sincerely apologize. And at that point, I was told that the problem is that I had said on one of my shows that I was feeling held back, that I wanted to talk about more things and that she didn't, and that was the problem. And I said, hey, you're right. I said it. And here's the thing. I did say it because that's how I felt. I still feel that way. And I think I was right to feel that way because now I'm doing the exact same thing, the exact thing I want to do. She's doing the exact thing she wants to do. We're both doing wonderfully on that. I don't see a problem with that. All right. I was just saying that. And that's what I meant. And by God, I still mean that. I apologize for that. I was like, hey, I'm sorry. I understand. Didn't mean to hurt your feelings. Please forgive me. And at that point, I thought that it was over. But it was not over. All right. It was not. I don't know what, I don't know what happened. I don't think that was actually I honestly don't think that was what it may have attributed to it. But I think it goes back to me calling Synchrony Bank a bunch of assholes on stage, because by God, they were. And I'm going to be honest with you. I was not the only person that was saying that. There was a lot of people that were publicly, behind the screen. They didn't want to say the shit in public. I'm the guy that'll say it in public. You bet your damn ass I will. All right. So I think that because I said that publicly, that it created some embarrassment. I can think it continued from there. And I have consistently been the person that will say the shit out loud. And I think that because of that, I lost a friend. Now, the reason this is in the don't do stupid shit is, hey, I would love to be able to make somebody and take offense to that and everything else. And the thing is I don't take offense, because you have to accept people for who they are. You have to understand what you can control and what you cannot control. If you spend your life trying to control other people, trying to make them do something, and then, feeling bad because, hey, they should act the way that you want them to act. No, they shouldn't. People are going to act the way they're going to act. You're either going to accept them for who they are or you're not. So the lesson of the day, and I said it at the beginning of this part of the segment, is understand what you can control and what you cannot control. The things that you cannot control, don't let those things control you. Don't do stupid shit. When we come back, we're going to do the Cybercrime State of the Union on the Brett Johnson Show. All right, so we're back to the Brett Johnson Show, the meat of the program. That's right. When it took this long to finally get to the meat of everything. So the meat of the program, Cybercrime State of the Union. Let me tell you, the State of the Union, if you're a criminal, man, oh man, it is gravy, gravy, gravy. They say crime don't pay. Let me tell you, crime absolutely pays. The biggest lie in the world is that crime doesn't pay. Yes, Virginia, crime does pay. Now, before we get started, I said that, the Silicon Valley Bank, it absolutely has a bit to do with today's Cybercrime of the Union, or State of the Union. So I want to go Frances Zelazny. She is the CEO of Anonybit, and they do an outstanding job. But she posted something about the 7 potential fraud vectors that people should watch out for due to the Silicon Valley Bank collapse. And I'm just going to list those real quick. She's got KYB, that's Know Your Business. Business email compromise. Yeah, I would say business email compromise is an absolute given on that. Invoice fraud. Yep, invoice fraud is not very difficult to commit. Personal bank account takeover, FDIC, deposit fraud, outbound call center fraud, and unemployment claim fraud and claim hijacking. Francis, I absolutely agree with you. Those are absolutely some of the vectors that people should be aware of when we're talking about the Silicon Valley Bank collapse. I would also add in any type of phishing and social engineering schemes as well into that mix. Now, hey, that being said, those things are common every single day across the board with a variety of different potential victims. Today, we're talking about the Cybercrime State of the Union. How to start this? I think that what we need to do is we need to go back and talk about some of the things I've talked about in the past, just kind of as a refresher for anyone who has not tuned in before. So for cybercrime to be successful, three things have to take place. There are three necessities to successfully committing online crime. Those three necessities are gathering data, committing the crime, and then finally cashing out. All three necessities have to work in conjunction. If they don't, the crime fails. Why even try? The problem with that is that a single criminal, one guy, is not good in all three things. He can do one thing, sometimes two, but rarely can he do all three. So he has to rely on other individuals, other criminals who are good in the areas where he is not. Now, gathering data, that's the stolen PII. That's your bank account logins. It's your passwords. It's your credit card information. It's all that stuff. It's also any type of tool that might be needed to go on and commit that type of crime. So spoofed phone calls, so that you don't see the phone number the criminal's calling from. You see the phone number of your financial institution or the FBI or the sheriff's department or the IRS or something like that. SOC 5 proxies, so that they may be located in Ghana, Nigeria, Florida, but they can make it appear that they're in New York, Canada, South America, the UK, wherever they want to make it appear. All right. So the tools and the PII, the data, is what goes under the gathering data aspect of the necessities of cybercrime. From there, you use that to commit the crime, and then finally you cash it out. Now, the reason that you see that it's never a single attacker which seeks to victimize you or your organization is two reasons. First, a skill gap. That specific criminal simply doesn't know how to do one of those three necessities. Maybe he doesn't know how to do a man-in-the-middle attack or reverse proxy attack, or he can't launch a phishing campaign or steal credit card details or some shit like that. Or he can do it, but someone else is better at it than he is, so he lets that expert fulfill that necessity. Okay? The other reason is that specific criminal is in a geographic area where they cannot fulfill one of those three necessities, typically laundering money, putting cash in pocket. So they have to rely on money mules to do that. We saw that during the pandemic. You had a lot of unemployment fraud that was committed by Ukrainians. Yeah, Ukrainians are not as pure and white and innocent as the driven snow. A lot of them are corrupt and a lot of them are criminals. Yes, I support Ukraine in the war, but we got to be honest about this shit. So you had a lot of the Ukrainians, a lot of Ukrainian elements that were committing unemployment fraud. You had a lot of Russian elements that were doing the same. And yes, I don't like Russia. I don't. I hope Vladimir Putin drops dead. I go to bed every single night praying, dear Lord, baby Jesus, please, please, dear Lord, baby Jesus, remove his sorry ass from this world. My prayers have not been answered yet. I even offer to tithe. I will gladly give you 10% of every single thing I make if you will just remove his worthless ass from this planet. And still my prayers have not been met. But there were a lot of criminals in the Ukraine, in Russia, in Europe that was committing unemployment fraud. The problem is that, hey, yeah, you could file the claims all day long. The data was absolutely there. But if you go to withdraw those funds in the Ukraine or in Russia, guess what? Are you going to get all those unemployment funds out? Probably not. At some point, somebody's going to notice, hey, they filed a claim of unemployment for California, yet they're in Kiev. Let's shut that shit down. So you had to rely on money mules to do it for you. So that's basically how cybercrime operates there. Now, in order for all that bullshit to work, guess what? Criminals have to trust one another. Oh, yeah. Because if you can't trust your other criminal on the other end of the line, that person that you don't know what they look like, you don't know their real name, you're never going to meet each other. How are you going to do business with each other? And that's what we developed with Shadow Crew, was the trust mechanism, this large communication channel, this forum type structure where individuals from different time zones could reference conversations days, weeks, months old. They could take part in those conversations, learn from those conversations, ask questions, network with people. You knew by looking at someone's screen name what the skill level of that criminal was, if you could trust that criminal, what the history of that criminal was, blah, blah, blah. We had vouching systems in place, escrow systems in place, review systems in place, all with the singular purpose of establishing trust with one criminal and another. That's the way cybercrime operates, and that's what makes it so successful. Now, Today, over time, so that was with the start of Shadow Crew, and over the years, there has been a few changes, a few nifty technological advances. One of those advances was the dark web, the Tor browser, the Onion router, developed by the United States Navy so that intelligence operatives could communicate with each other without being identified. The Navy, in their infinite wisdom, they decided to make it open source so that whistleblowers could report things and so that people behind unfriendly countries' firewalls could access the real world and get real truth and news. All right. So they did that. But when they made it open source, they forgot that the first people to adopt technology, when that technology can be used to remain somewhat anonymous, the first adoptees tend to be criminals. So criminals flock to the damn thing. Now, when Tor first came out, it was absolutely useless because until you get a lot of user base, it's extremely slow. The more people who use Tor, the faster it becomes. You get more nodes, everything else goes out there. So people started to use Tor. Tor, if used properly, is very effective about remaining anonymous. If used properly, that's a huge caveat. Now, let's take a break for a second and talk about this concept of friction. Usually you only hear friction being used when we're talking about it on the good guy side. You know, you go to a bank or a website. Well, when they're talking about security and the customer interaction, the user experience, they don't want a high degree of friction. They want things to be frictionless, meaning that user experience, it's going to be very free-flowing, very fast, very quick. You're not going to have a lot of hiccups along the way. Security creates friction, okay? Security, you know, if you have to go through multi-factor authentication, if you have to put a password and login in, if you have to redo your CVV numbers every single time you go, whatever that is, or whatever slows down the user experience because that site's trying to have good security and not be hit by a bunch of cyber criminals like I used to be, that is friction. It's whatever disrupts that user experience, okay? The idea being is you don't want a lot of friction toward the legitimate customers, but you want a lot of friction toward criminal elements. You want to make sure you're keeping the criminals out and the customers don't even know there's any security in place. That's the idea. The thing is that friction not only applies to the good guys, it also applies to the bad guys. And Tor, the Onion router, the way that you access the dark web, Tor is very high friction. You damn right it is. You have to download a browser, a very specific browser. There's no search engine for Tor, so you have to know exactly where the hell you're going to. That becomes a problem because guess what? It's not like www.thebrettjohnsonshow.com. Oh no, it's this long-ass thing that you cannot remember. No, you cannot remember that website address at all. You're like, holy hell, I'm going to have to write that down and hope I get it down right, or copy paste, or some bullshit. So you have to know where you're going. You have to know how to have it properly configured, or else your real IP number is going to be exposed. That's a huge problem for criminals. Yes, it is. So you have to have all this stuff. You have to have it updated constantly, everything else. You have to really know how to use it. But the friction goes even deeper than that. There are a lot of criminal elements on Tor that look to victimize the other criminals that are on there. So you've got a lot of phishing campaigns that go on. You've got a lot of fake sites that are up. You've got a lot of crime and scams that take place on Tor, increasing the amount of friction. At the same time, the legitimate marketplaces and the legitimate criminal forums and legitimate criminal marketplaces. Yeah, is that an oxymoron from hell? Those places are getting DDoSed from hell by other criminals. Yes, other criminals are DDoSing those sites and they are spear phishing, but phishing out the users of those sites to extort them, to steal money, to hold the marketplaces and forums for ransom, saying, hey, we're going to keep DDoSing you unless you pay us some ransom money. So friction through the roof. A lot of the times the sites are shut down, everything else, okay? Matter of fact, the Reddit of the dark web, this place called Dread has been pretty much unusable for well over a year now. At one point, you had no search function at all on Dread. Dread is, what happened is this user goes by the screen name of Hugbutter. Back in 2017, the largest criminal network on the planet called Alphabay, it gets shut down by law enforcement. Okay. There was another website, another criminal forum at that point in time called Hansa Market. So what happens is the owner of Alphabet, he gets arrested. He promptly hangs himself in a jail in Thailand. All the users, 240,000 strong, all the users, they didn't know where the hell to go. So chatter starts to build up saying, hey, everyone's moving over to Hansa Market. That's going to be the new criminal empire right there. So everyone goes over to Hansa Market. 2 weeks later, federal authorities announce, guess what? We compromised that shit too. Well, what happens is that causes so much paranoia in the dark web. People start thinking, hey, the feds have an exploit. They're able to figure out who everyone is. We don't need to use this anymore. So people start running away from the dark web. They start setting up shop on Reddit, of all places. Yeah, so Reddit has all these subreddits talking about the dark web, talking about drug trafficking, talking about fraud, all this other stuff. And you see a lot of business over there. And Reddit let it go. Now, why did Reddit let it go? Reddit let it go because guess what? They're getting all that data from all those damn criminals, and they're turning it over to law enforcement. That's what happened. After a while, Reddit starts to shut down those criminal elements. This one developer, criminal developer, screen name Hugbunter, play on words of Bug Hunter. But Hugbunter, he decides he's going to build the Reddit of the dark web, and he does. He builds this thing called Dread, and it is amazing. It was so effective that it centralized a lot of the criminal chatter among financial cyber criminals on the dark web, at least English-speaking ones, okay? So the problem is that, like I said, it's high friction. It was very difficult to access his site. He had CAPTCHAs from hell. You think that some of these CAPTCHAs that legitimate people use are good? No. Hugbunter took that shit to a brand new level. All right. So it was high friction. And at the same time, he started to get DDoS attacks. These people that were trying to extort the site saying, hey, you're going to have to pay us X amount of dollars if you don't want to be DDoSed. So he started trying to fight against that. He started to try to develop a website where it would not be affected by DDoS attacks. He also shut down the search function on the site for several months, meaning it was effectively unusable by most criminals that were out there. Recently, Dread's been completely shut down. It's been DDoSed out of existence. So where do those criminals go? Well, I'll tell you where they go. You've got this nifty little app called Telegram. So Telegram is something that you can install on your phone. It's owned by a Russian who is very anti-law enforcement. He simply does not answer any, and I mean any, subpoena requests. Now, Telegram's been around for a few years. And over this few year span of time, we have seen consistently the newbies that have hit Telegram, they've started their criminal lives on Telegram. You know, the inexperienced players, the people who are doing social engineering campaigns, typically people who do refund fraud, who do gift card fraud, you know, not really highly sophisticated levels of fraud. Okay, not at all. The problem is that now that you've got the centralized location of criminal chatter on the dark web effectively shut down, and it's been shut down for months. The problem is that now you're seeing more and more of those sophisticated expert criminals that are going to Telegram because they have no other place to go than Telegram. So they're migrating over to Telegram, bringing the education level of Telegram up substantially at that point in time. Now, that's not the only thing that's going on. We've got this little thing called the Ukraine War. Vlad, the Impaler Putin, decided he was going to invade Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine. Now, let's be honest. There's a whole shit ton of cyber criminals in both of those countries. And both of those countries help facilitate cybercrime. Both of those countries harbor their cyber criminals, and they don't really like to turn them over for prosecution. That's what happens. But here's the deal. We got a war going on over there. Now, I don't know if you guys knew it or not, but cyber criminals, we are not fighters. We are lovers. And we sometimes are not even good lovers. Well, it turns out that a bunch of the Ukrainians and a bunch of Russians, they don't want to fight. They're scared they're going to get their asses shot off. So what are they doing? They're running for the border. Oh, yeah. Those Russians, they're leaving Russia. Those Ukrainians, they're leaving Ukraine because they don't want to fight. They want to steal money. So now, instead of them being in those centralized geographic locations of Ukraine and Russia, they're spreading out across Europe, spreading out in North and South America, all over the planet. Now, that's a problem. The reason that's a problem is that you used to be able to look at criminal activity by geographic location, and you would typically be able to know what crimes those criminals were committing. For example, in the Ukraine and in Russia, a lot of it was bot-driven, a lot of automated attacks. You had a lot of tools that were being developed and things like that because it was difficult to cash out in those areas. So they tended to be vendors and salespeople and tool developers, and they developed this platform of cybercrime as a service, okay? So that was what was going on. But now they're dispersing across the globe. At the same time, a lot of the non-English speaking forums are drying up because of the Ukraine conflict. All right. So they're drying up. Where are those non-English speakers going? They're going to English speaking platforms. So we're seeing a renaissance of English speaking cybercrime environments. At the same time, we're seeing a dispersal of sophisticated expert criminals across the globe. So we're seeing that mixture all of a sudden come back. We've not seen it from a crime point of view. It's not really been this exciting since the Shadow Crew days. I expect we'll see a lot of innovation, a lot of very successful crime happening. That's exactly what I expect. And understand a lot of it has to do with Telegram. Telegram is trusted now. Why is it trusted? Well, because the fucking military trusts it. The Ukraine military is using it. There are Russian elements that are using it, and they trust it. They trust the encryption on it. If it's good enough for the military, I promise you it's good enough for the cyber criminals that are out there. They're going to absolutely use it 100%, and that's exactly what's going on, okay? We're seeing right now on the cybercrime side, so that's kind of the state of the cybercrime forums and chatter that's going on. You're seeing a renaissance of the English-speaking channels. You're seeing a lot of you're seeing the dispersal of criminals across the board. You're seeing a lot of the experts that were on the dark web, those more expertise, the criminals with expertise, those experts in criminal environment, in committing crime, the master criminals. You're seeing those people that are now going to Telegram. And that whole environment is raising up a notch as far as sophistication and education, types of crime and profit that's taking place as well. That's exactly what's going on. And it's going to continue like that as long as Telegram is a viable platform to use, as long as it's easily accessed. And here's the thing, it's got zero chatter. It's got zero friction. All right. You can do a keyword search. You can set up your own channel pretty easily. Everything's encrypted across the board. Law enforcement has a shitload of problems identifying or tracking those crimes that are going on. How do they track them? Well, it turns out that even back in Shadow Crew, people talked way too much. And that's exactly what goes on now. A lot of the chatter that takes place on these environments, English chatter, it's very easy for law enforcement to start identifying these people. I mean, for Christ's sakes, you've got criminals that are posting receipts of where they've stolen stuff from. You've got them taking snapshots of their stolen goods and wares and walking people through who the victims were and everything else. So it's not rocket science sometimes to identify who these criminals are. But because we're seeing the influx of these more skilled criminals coming into that environment, you can bet your bottom dollar that they're going to learn proper operational security before the end of the day. So that's what's going on. At the same time, we're continuing to see the vendors. It's like there's a mass consciousness all of a sudden of vendors understanding that 98% plus of the cyber criminals that are out there are not sophisticated. They are not. They don't understand the dynamics of cybercrime. They don't know how to pull a reverse proxy attack or build a bot network or build and deploy ransomware, things like that. So we're seeing sophisticated products and services that are being developed and marketed toward those 98% of unsophisticated criminal attackers. That's what you see with Genesis Marketplace. Genesis Marketplace is a bot marketplace that lists 400,000 bots. Bots range anywhere from $3 up to $400 a pop. Bots sit on someone's network, captures their credentials coming through, captures the session cookie coming through, has an automated browser plugin or standalone browser that you can plug. You can just inject the stolen cookie into that browser, come in, take over someone's account, take over from there. You're seeing that with Evil Proxy, this reverse proxy attack, which was at a nation state level not too long ago. Now it's being marketed and geared toward unsophisticated attackers, being charged anywhere from $150 up to $400 for monthly access to that type of system. That is the state of the union with cybercrime. The pandemic, my God, the pandemic. Woody Talcove over at LexisNexis, he and Paul Eklof are on point in understanding the importance that the pandemic played in cybercrime environments. And I'll tell you what the importance is. When Shadow Crew was shut down in 2004, we ended with 4,000 members. Fast forward to 2017, largest criminal network we've already mentioned, Alpha Bay, ends with 240,000 members. 2 years later, 2019, just a dark web marketplace gets shut down, 1.15 million members. All of that is pre-pandemic. During the pandemic, what happened? Well, the government, in their infinite wisdom, they put out stimulus programs. They put out stimulus programs with absolutely no security in place whatsoever for 6 months. During that 6-month span in time, you had unemployment fraud, you had EIDL, you had PPP, you had all these other little programs that were going on out there. Criminals ate that alive. It didn't matter what crime your usual cyber criminal was out there committing: credit card fraud, account takeovers, gift card fraud, refunding fraud. It didn't matter what the crime was. They stopped all synthetic fraud. They stopped all that shit, and they pivoted over to unemployment fraud, typically because there was no security in place. The government had all the money in the world, and fraudsters could steal as much money as quickly as they possibly could, and they did. On Telegram, you had 16-year-olds that were bragging about stealing $60,000 a week on unemployment fraud. So what happened? Well, I'll tell you what happened. The fraudster numbers went through the roof. Now you've got communities that are millions of members large. You've got groups on Facebook. You've got YouTube videos. You've got Telegram. You've got some dark web stuff. You got service web. You got dark web. You got webs all over the place full of criminals. And what else? I'll just put things into perspective. Got 37,000 FBI field agents, 56 field offices. Less than 200 of them are concentrated on cybercrime. We had a lot of small business administration fraud going on. How many small business investigators are there? Across the nation, about 29. Meanwhile, you've got millions of criminals that are out there. One of the things that the pandemic did, other than exponentially increasing the number of fraudsters, is it gave an awareness to fraudsters of, hey, you can make a lot of money committing these crimes. And some of these targets are very, very soft. It gave them the idea that, hey, that government, like I'm the guy that created tax return identity theft. That's one of my claims of notoriety or claims of fame. Up until the pandemic, a lot of fraudsters, they knew tax fraud. They knew that was one way to steal money, but they didn't really appreciate a lot of the government benefits that were out there as a point of profit potential. That has changed. Now you've got a shit ton of fraudsters that are looking toward that government vertical on how they can profit. That's why you're seeing disability fraud. That's why you're seeing FEMA fraud. That's why you're seeing food stamp fraud. That's why you continue to see unemployment fraud. It's going to continue like that. That's always, from this point on, it's going to be one of those things that's constantly pinged by criminals. But it goes a little bit further than that. Criminals are now looking at verticals that they've never really looked at before as ways to profit. All right. So it's not just the government vertical. They're looking at infrastructure, looking at all these other things. Now, going back into the State of the Union, because of the Ukraine war, I've said before that motivations to commit crime, there are only three motivations: status, cash, ideology. Status, trying to impress your criminal peers. Because if you impress your criminal peers, that respect equates to profit. Cash, most attacks are for cash these days, but ideology. Ideology is the big one, because an ideological attack is an attack that does not go away. It is persistent, it is forever, and it is against you specifically. All right. What we're seeing because of the Ukraine war is you're seeing basically the injection of ideology into cash-based attacks. Think about that for a second. You're seeing targets that are targeted trying to steal money, but they're also targeted because of ideological reasons. Okay. And that's a big shift all of a sudden, because you're seeing the Russian government, you're seeing the Ukrainians saying, hey, attack these people, attack these people, attack these people. We're going to give you carte blanche on that. You've got a free reign. Don't worry about any type of consequences. Well, that invitation of financial cyber criminals, the people who are basically just motivated by money, that invitation comes with it a degree of belonging, a degree of purpose, a degree of reason. If you can convince someone that you're doing the right thing on top of being able to make money, by God, you're doing something all of a sudden. So we're going to continue to see the influx of ideology into financial cybercrime environments, the indoctrination of these financial cyber criminals as well. That's pretty much the State of the Union. Basically, what it amounts to is that crime as we know it right now, cybercrime, man, it is a good time to be a criminal. I will add into it that things like Silicon Valley Bank. Silicon Valley Bank, I mentioned at the top of the show, 65,000 startups rely on Silicon Valley Bank. A shit ton of cybersecurity companies rely on that. One of the things that we've seen with the recession, all the layoffs and all that, a lot of security companies are being dismissed. A lot of workers at security companies are being laid off. A lot of decisions for companies right now, they are choosing to not continue on with certain security services because they're saving money by not doing so, making it much easier for criminals to come in and successfully profit. All right. So just bear that in mind as we go along. The collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, that absolutely will make crime easier at the end of the day. The economy will absolutely result in more criminals. It will absolutely result in easier crime being committed at the end of the day. That is cybercrime. That is the State of the Union. We are not in a good position. We are not. It's important right now. As things continue to go south, it's important, looking at it from an economic point of view, guns are butter. Security is important. You must have security in place, because if you don't, you will be eaten alive. We're seeing that right now with all the mail theft across the United States. That's a very low, sophisticated crime. All right. It's very easy to commit that crime. But because of the way cybercrime environments network together, the way Telegram works, all these people sharing and exchanging information, the education level continues to increase, the networking level continues to increase. We're seeing a lot of profit just by stealing the mail. A lot of sophistication coming from that unsophisticated type of crime. We're going to continue to see that. And make no mistake, check washing, the security is there to stop that. It is absolutely there. The paper has been around for years so that you can't wash a check. The ink has been around for years so that you can't wash a check. They're not using it because it costs money. Same thing for securing mailboxes. Those security tools and services are there. We have the postal police officers. They can do their job. They're just not allowed to do their job because of budgetary concerns, because of the powers that be, things like that. The ability to secure those boxes, of putting GPSs on keys where the key is only or a security tool on a key where it's only specific to that one box. And if it's compromised, you can shut it. That is absolutely in play. But they're not putting that in there because it costs money to do that. That's the way security is as a whole. We could lock down these things. We could absolutely have proper security across a variety of different verticals. That's not being done, and it's actually being taken away because of the way the economy is going, because of inflation, because of things like Silicon Valley Bank shutting down. End of the day, it is a very good time to be a criminal. Crime absolutely pays. So, State of the Union for cybercrime. The State of the Union is healthy. The union is profitable, and the union sees a very fruitful and bright future. I am Brett Johnson. This is the Brett Johnson Show. Closing things out, what do we say? We say stay safe, stay secure, and stay vigilant. More importantly, this is the Brett Johnson Show. At the end of the day, just do the right damn thing. I'm Brett Johnson. Thank you for listening. Until next time.